Stocks, bonds, ETFs, straight out of downtown Chicago. This is Zacks Market Edge.
Welcome to Zacks Market Edge, the podcast about investing in your life. I'm your host, Tracy Reinick, and this week I'm joined by Kevin Matras, Zacks expert stock screener and head of the Research Wizard division here at Zacks, and also the editor of Zacks Option Trader Service. But we're not talking about options this time because we're going back to our favorite subject other than options, which is the movies and what happened this summer, how it impacts the entertainment stocks, if any of them look decent here. We're going to really get into that. And just what was happening at the Cineplex, who are the winners and the losers. So this summer, was basically defined, Kevin, by these big tentpole movies. We saw a lot of those and the sequels. And then there was some smaller original content type movies that people kind of wrote off, like, who cares about those? But it turns out those smaller original content movies actually did really well at the box office based on what their budgets were. They were making money for all these studios for the most part. And some of the tentpole movies, while some made money, there were a few big busts as usual. You're really rolling the dice with some of these big studio pictures, and there were a couple losers. So let's start off first with kind of what these smaller movies did. There were a couple of big winners in the small movie category, and a lot of them were in the horror. Did you see any of these horror type films that were out? This is like the return of horror. They had The Conjuring 2. That made over $300 million worldwide now. It's on a $40 million budget. That was a Time Warner. That was Warner Brothers movie. Then you had Lights Out. I don't even know what this one is. I didn't hear about this one. This was also the low budget. They've made $126 million worldwide with that one. That was also Warner Brothers. They made a big, thing into this. Then at the end of the summer, we had Don't Breathe. That was Sony, actually.
That's still out right now.
That's still out, and that's made over $50 million now already on also a really low budget. So I guess the moral of the summer is make horror movies.
It's funny, because I'm a movie buff just like you are, and I'll see pretty much any kind of movie, but I won't see a horror movie.
I won't either. So both of us are non-horror people.
I remember seeing Exorcist when I was a kid, and it just scared the living daylights out of me. Even to this day, if I see it on TV as a commercial, I will get up and flip that channel as quick as I can. So I saw Conjuring. I knew I saw the trailers for Conjuring, and I saw how successful these movies were. And it was like, oh my God, I don't want to see this. Or another one like last year, Paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
For the trailer, they said it will wreck your life. You'll never be able to forget it. And I'm thinking, I don't want to ruin my life to watch this movie. So I passed on every single horror. I do want to see the Don't Breathe because that has a twist.
It does.
I'm one of those guys who likes to read the ending. So I'll go to spoiler.net to see how it ends.
Okay. Did you ever see... on the same topic, did you ever see Blair Witch when that was originally?
No, I did see that.
Okay, me too.
So that was pretty awesome.
They're re-releasing it. It's coming out again this month.
Well, they have, they're going to re-release it, but I think a Blair Witch 2 is coming out.
Maybe that's what I saw.
It's supposed to be like kind of picking up where the first one left off. Okay. And I know they did some additional sequels, but those kind of flopped. Okay. But there's supposed to be a new one coming out, and that should be big business. So I did see Blair Witch, but when it comes to horror movies, pass.
What about The Purge? That wasn't really horror, but it kind of had this darker element. Purge, the election year. There's several purges, so we have to say which one it is. That had a $10 million budget, and it made $105 million worldwide, so real successful, and that was Universal Comcast.
Yeah, those have always been big profits for the studio. I did see the Purge movies, and, that's not really horror. It's violence and there's a lot of suspense, so I can handle that. But ghosts and goblins and demons, I don't want any part of that.
But I do know you've seen some of these other smaller budget movies. You saw Bad Moms, right? That's the Mila Kunis,
It's
Kristen
funny,
Bell.
You and I were talking about it, and I wanted to see it.
You didn't?
I ended up not seeing it yet.
I thought you went.
Did.
No, I didn't see it either. I was waiting for your review.
Well, I did see that it finally crossed over the 100 million mark. I think it was either last weekend or the weekend before. But I think they produced that for like, I don't know, $6 million or $10 million. So that has just been straight up profit for the studio. And I
Yeah.
think that was what, STX?
Yeah, that they're a new studio. They've only been in business since 2014. So
Right.
this is their first $100 million movie. It was rated R comedy,
Yeah.
which is a little rare.
I
to
think
get
that's
over.
like one of the highest grossing R-rated comedies. Definitely the highest rated R grossing comedies for women.
Well, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Sausage Party. Now,
Awesome.
You saw that one.
I saw that.
Okay, that's another one. It only had a $20 million budget, and they're going to make about $100 million, at least domestically, off
Right.
that one.
Now, that was great. It was the most profane and vulgar and ridiculous concept you will ever see in a movie. And it was just hilarious. And, you know, it's Seth Rogen and his crew. But yeah, I would highly recommend it if you are not offended easily. And yeah, great movie.
That was Sony. They
Yeah.
took a real risk on that one. I mean, even with only a $20 million budget, but that's real original content and obviously, you know, a cartoon and all of that.
Yeah.
What about The Shallows? That was also Sony. That was the Blake Lively stranded out on the buoy with the shark circling. That had a $17 million budget and it made $93 million.
Yeah. That was a big hit. I didn't see it. I wanted to. You know, I didn't see as many movies this year as I typically do.
Yeah, what's wrong?
Shallows was one of the ones I wanted to see, but I was not able to see it. But I did see her husband's movie, Deadpool, which was great.
That was pre-summer.
That was pre-summer, but that happened to be in one of the top 10 grossing movies of 2016. So I was supporting the family.
Okay. So one of the other real big original content winners, I'm pretty sure you didn't see this one, Kevin.
How do you know?
Me Before You.
I did not.
the paraplegic love story set in Britain. It was made for only about $20 million. In the US, it made $56 million, but it crushed it overseas, $140 million over there for $194 million. That was Warner Brothers. It was based on a best-selling novel. It came out kind of early in the summer. We all cried in the theater.
Is that the one, the girl from Game of Thrones and
Yes.
the guy from Hunger Games? That
Yes.
was that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It looked,
Yes.
I would look like
You'll
I
have to
was
rent
gonna
that one.
break down and start crying. So I didn't
You
see
do
that
cry
one.
in that, but apparently the audience was there for that kind of. It was, I would call it a romantic drama.
Really?
It's not the comedy side, really. So they don't make many of those anymore. And this one, you know, again, maybe they're going to start making a lot of her books like they do Nicholas Sparks,
Yeah.
because they're always looking for these kind of romantic dramas, and
Right.
the book world is a
And
good
the
place.
series, right? Everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon, but it's been
Yeah.
kind of hit or miss. A lot of studios are not having the greatest amount of luck with being able to turn these book series into profitable movies. So good for them; they were able to do it with Me Before You.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about Lionsgate since you brought up these series as a studio. Okay, so they had Twilight, they had Hunger Games. This
Right.
crushed it. They had Divergent. We know some of the problems with that, and they're going to maybe go to cable or television for the final installment on that. It's unclear. But now they're basically in the specialty film category again. So they no longer have these big blockbusters, at least right now. So over the summer, they had a number of films that did pretty well, actually. They're either first or second, depending on how the numbers work out this weekend, Labor Day weekend, with the overall and the specialty films. Now, in that area, that's more the indie films, the smaller but real small budgets.
Right.
And they released 27 of those films this summer, up from 25 last year. Lionsgate is usually one of the big distributors in that category. So they had two big hits, Cafe Society, which was Woody Allen's movie. And then they had, at the end of the summer, Hell or High Water, which
Right.
they kind of started off real slow in limited release. And this weekend, Labor Day weekend, it opened up on 1,300 screens. It's made $16.5 million, which is good for, again, a small budget film. It's getting a lot of critical success. And then they're expanding it over into Europe, I know, this month in September. So they haven't had buzz at all with a lot of these smaller films, but they're seemingly out of the game with these big blockbusters.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Lionsgate was, I mean, that was a stock that I was in for probably 3-4 years. And I think I made over 300% return before I finally got out last year. And they were just struggling with being able to find really big tentpole profitable pictures once Hunger Games was over. I mean, they just weren't really able to get any big things out the door. When I look at what happened to them in 2015, when you look at the big theatrical releases, they had one of the smallest slates of big theatrical releases. They only had 10 big pictures coming out in 2015. Usually they have anywhere from 14, 15 pictures. So they had a lot of money riding on those 10 pictures, and none of them really hit. And when they finally ended up reporting earnings in Q4 of 2015, they just missed terribly, and the proverbial stuff hit the fan. And between the fourth quarter of last year and now, that stock has been just decimated. It's been cut in half.
Yeah, but I looked at the fundamentals there, and it's not cheap. The estimates are being cut still.
Right.
And so even with the shares declining, it has a forward P of 53.
Right.
I mean, something's got to give. It seems like it might have further decline in the future there.
When I look at that chart, I mean, when I got out a long time ago, I keep thinking to myself, I'm looking for a place to hop back in because they have such an extensive library of movies and TV shows, because they're really experts at distribution and licensing and all of this stuff. But you need to have more new content, and they just haven't really been able to hit on that front. I like Lionsgate. I would love to buy it if they could drop down a little bit more, especially given the fact that with only 10 big pictures out last year, I believe next year they're supposed to have as many as 17. So you can see they're really gearing up to be able to increase their big theatrical releases. Again, we were talking about Blair Witch 2. That could be an interesting thing. Power Rangers is going to come out next year. That could be a big tentpole for them. But yeah, Lionsgate, I mean, that's probably the poster child for what's been happening to a lot of these studio stocks, because they're struggling across the board.
Yeah. So let's talk about Disney. That was kind of the golden child.
Right.
And that those shares have struggled in 2016.
Right.
They're actually kind of attractively valued. They have a forward PE of 16. They do pay the dividend. Earnings expected to grow a little bit here and slow down a little bit next year. But I don't think it's the film side that's their problem, because they did take the box office crown this summer with two huge films, Finding Dory and then the Avengers film. And they saw over $1 billion in box office receipts. They had a couple losers, though. They had a loser on Spielberg's The BFG. I didn't even remember.
Yeah, that was
film.
recently.
Yeah, that was the summer. It grossed only $54 million domestically. It cost $140 million to make. It's only made $160 worldwide, but they can absorb that because of these, huge tallies with the other films. And then they have the Star Wars movie. I keep seeing the trailers for it.
Yeah, that
coming
Rogue
out.
One that's going to be out in December.
Yeah, big holiday film for that. Plus just the licensing and all of that on all of these types of films is huge for them.
I look at Disney. I've always thought that was a great long-term play. I still do. But the last time you and I were talking about movies was probably in November of last year. And since that time, I think Disney is down like 20% since that discussion. And they've just had hit after hit after hit. Looking at the top 10 movies for 2016, Disney or, one of their other studios, Buena Vista, they're responsible for the top 4 of the top 10. But it hasn't really changed their fortunes much. Yeah. And if you take a look at their earnings estimate revisions, for the full year, I believe over the last 60 days, estimates are coming down. Not a huge, but they're still down by about 0.5%. For 2017, they're down by 1.15%. So they're struggling, even though they seemingly can do almost no wrong, except for that BFG. When you take a look at their studio revenue, these big theatrical releases only account for about 15-20% of total revenue. So even if everything they touched turned out to be the next Avengers or the next Star Wars, that isn't going to be enough to compensate for the other struggles that they're
Right.
having, which a lot of it has to do with their other media arms, not the
Right.
least of which is cable.
Yeah, that's one of the dangers we've always warned people about with these
Right.
studio stocks. It's not just about the movies. Of course, if you have a big bust, that really hurts you. Let's talk about some of those. Paramount, they had the Ben-Hur bust. Unfortunate for them, cost
Yeah.
about 100 million. They've made just 42 million to date. But apparently I read this, they actually in agreement with MGM on that one. So they're not going to take the full brunt of all the losses on that. But they also had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which did okay. It made
Yeah.
242 million, but that's almost like half of what the last Teenage Mutant Ninja
Right.
Turtles made. So they seem to be struggling a little bit. Their parent is Viacom. Viacom earnings expected to decline 28% this year. They're actually pretty cheap with a forward P of 10. But as you said, like a lot of these, they have other things going on
Right.
in their media divisions.
You know, they had that Star Trek movie out. That was them as well.
Yeah,
And
Paramount.
I didn't see it. That is one I
Oh,
do want
boy.
to see, but I think it's coming out on video September 9th.
It is?
So,
Already?
yeah, so I'm going to check that out.
That one
But
has been one of their hits, actually.
yeah, but again, that one didn't do as well as the first couple. I think worldwide so far, it only did like
I see 286.
the last number I saw was 220, so
Yeah, but they
286 is better.
but they just opened in China over the weekend. They
Oh, well,
made
that's
30
good.
million there. They haven't opened in Mexico or Argentina and a few other
Yeah.
Latin America. So that number will probably still grow. So that seems like a success.
Yeah, but I thought the second installment, I thought that did close to 500 million.
Yeah.
So being able to clock in at let's say 350 after everything is said and done, that's kind of a disappointment. They also have that new Jack Reacher film that's going to be coming out with Tom Cruise. He's always a big draw. But the first Jack Reacher I thought was fantastic, but that too only did about 220. So even if they're able to do as well as the first one, and it looks like this trend is usually
Yeah.
they're doing worse,
Yeah.
that isn't going to move the needle for them either. But it's interesting too because Paramount, they're one of America's longest running studios.
Sure.
And they're just kind of like almost an also ran studio nowadays.
A little bit right now. I did notice, because I did see the Star Trek film, that Alibaba Pictures was involved in that one because they had their logo right at the very beginning of the film, which I've never seen before. So it seems
Yeah,
like
you were
they
telling me
have,
about that.
yeah, that they have a Chinese partner here, and that's why they made a pretty big push, it seemed. They
Yeah.
sent the cast over to China in several cities over there for that opening. It seemed to have worked to get the 30 million.
And Hunan TV, right? You said
Yeah,
you saw that
there
logo
was some
as
kind of
well?
other logo, yeah. So it seems we're seeing a lot of these partnerships with Chinese investors and Chinese media
Right.
companies.
You and I were talking earlier, because one of the things that was exciting about Lionsgate early on is last year is they were forming partnerships with Hunan TV and the Alibaba Group. So it was interesting that you didn't see the Lionsgate logo for the movie. Although I have a feeling that that the Lionsgate partnerships is really just trying to bring the licensing and the distribution to the broadcast media. So they're going to be the ones probably streaming it online once it has its theatrical run and all of that stuff. But it is interesting how important the Chinese partnerships are becoming.
Yeah.
Because, you take a look at Deadpool, for example. Deadpool, that was, I still believe it was in the top 10. I think it was the 6th highest grossing movie of this year, but they did not get a chance to show in China. And Deadpool without China did 782 million, but China probably could have added an additional anywhere from 70 million to 100 million. So if you're fortunate enough to be able to get your movie shown in China, and there's only a limited number of US movies that can get runtime in China. If you're fortunate enough to be shown in China, usually that means you can almost be guaranteed a success. But if
Right.
you're not in China, that is going to have a significant negative impact on your bottom line. So more and more people are doing everything they can to either film over there or get Chinese actors or get Chinese investors. everybody's making a push to be able to somehow align themselves with China, and it makes total sense.
Another movie that kind of didn't live up to expectations was Ghostbusters, which I did see. And that had a budget of 144 million. It's only made about 217 million worldwide. So they're going to take a loss on that. That's Sony taking the loss. And apparently they're not going to make a sequel. And they might make, television type sequels like cartoon sequels and things like that. They will license out the characters and all of that. So they'll make some money off of that. But that was one, kind of black mark for Sony there. But Sony's numbers, well, their forward P is 41, so they're not cheap here either. Because they're over in Japan, we only have 2 analysts covering them. So it's a little bit harder to know what they're doing. And they also have the big electronics division and all this other stuff going on.
Right. The for Sony, I mean, I'm looking at their earnings estimate revisions, and they just look terrible. But it seems like if you have a good if a good portion of your business has to do with licensing and TV and that type of distribution, that is where a lot of these multimedia conglomerate companies are making their money. I see this with Comcast. I see it with Lionsgate. Hopefully, Sony will be able to do the same. I'm seeing it with Warner Brothers. So that, I believe, is the area that if you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm looking at these studio stocks, that's great. Find the companies that are putting out some big hits, but you really got to dig in and take a look at what's happening with the other media components of that company. And that's why I think Comcast is probably one, that's the Universal.
Yeah.
That's one of the best ones, I think, of the whole bunch. Even though Disney has the best movies, when I take a look at, how the stock is performing and what they have down the pike, I think Comcast shines above all the rest right now, to be honest with you.
Okay. Their estimates are also down, like everybody's, like you've been saying.
Right.
I kind of like Time Warner. They are supposed to grow earnings 14% this year and another 10% next year, and they're actually among the cheaper stocks with the forward P of 14.4, but you really have to know what else is going on there.
Yeah. I like Warner Brothers, Time Warner. Again, it's funny too, because it's still a relatively smaller portion of the entire pie. And even though their Justice League got kind of off to a shaky start with Batman versus Superman, they really pulled it together with Suicide Squad, and I believe they have 11 or 12 other big theatrical releases that are going to be coming down the pike between now and 2020, or maybe it was 2025. But if you have these successful movies, that just gives you an opportunity to be able to push those out in all of your other platforms and all of your other merchandising. So, even though we say that a lot of these studios, the theatrical releases in and of themselves are only accounting for, let's say, 20-25% of revenue, you have to think about all the ancillary channels there are. So if you have a terrible movie, you don't have the ability of monetizing those other channels. If you do have a good movie, you can really monetize the heck out of it. Just take a look at Frozen, which is a movie that just keeps on giving for Disney.
Yeah. Okay, so the biggest bust of the summer, other than Ben-Hur, was Universal's pop star Never Stop, Never Stopping. Now, I do have to admit, I saw this. I was one of the few people. It only made 9.5 million, and it was released in wide release. So it was the worst of the big studio releases.
Was that the Andy
Samberg? Yes. It was R-rated comedy where he played kind of like a Justin Bieber type character, like a pop star guy, and what happens like behind the scenes. I liked it. I thought it was good. You should rent it.
I wanted to see it. I didn't. Again, shame on me.
No one else did either.
But clearly, but when I saw his special on HBO, which was, I believe, 7 Days in Hell, that was the tennis spoof. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't see that one.
Highly recommended.
I have to watch that
and
one.
when I did see the trailer, I was like, oh my God, I got to see this one. This is going to be hilarious. And then I just continued with the rest of my life, and I never saw it.
That's what everybody did. But they did take a risk on that one. It didn't pan out, but I definitely recommend people rent that one.
I wonder, though, how much money that will do in home video rentals, because a lot of these movies that do 300, 400, 500 million, they're good for another 100 million just on the rentals alone.
Yeah, and other
And
stuff.
yeah, and if it has a long shelf life, that is just going to be licensed over and over again. Maybe that's not going to be one of those, but still.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just switch a little bit to our opinions on what happened this summer.
Okay.
What was your favorite of the tentpole movies?
I mean, when I have said this to everybody just kind of rolls their eyes and cringes when I say it. But I did see Captain America Civil War, and they should put that in a time capsule along with Gone with the Wind.
Oh boy.
And in 100 years, when people open it up, they'll be like, oh my God, these people were cinematic geniuses. I thought it was one of the best movies I have seen. Now, I've seen some great movies
Okay.
too, but it was fantastic. It was very satisfying, but that was one of my favorites.
Okay, my favorite, I can't believe I'm even saying this, was The Legend of Tarzan. Like, I still am
Right.
thinking about it months later. It could have been better. Like, they lost a real opportunity there, and it did okay at the box office.
Right.
But there was just something about actually seeing Tarzan as you imagine him for real. Like, it's been
Right.
made
It
before.
wasn't cartoony.
Yeah. It was like really him flying through the jungle and talking with the apes, and like, oh, there's the real lions coming up
Right.
to him, because they can do so much with the CGI now. And I really believed I was looking at Tarzan, and that stuff was, I did. And that stuff was all cool. Like, the story was meh, and I felt like they could have done more with the romance with Jane.
Got it.
They did a lot of stuff in flashback, which I didn't mind.
Right.
So he was Lord Greystoke at the beginning of the movie already. But the rest of it was just brilliantly done.
Right.
So it was like entertaining as a summer popcorn movie.
Great movie, better than I thought. My wife liked it as well. But that also, it's interesting because that did okay here in the
It made
States,
money.
but it made the bulk of their profits overseas.
Yeah.
And in China, it was a huge hit.
Its budget was big. It's part
Yeah,
of the
I believe it
problem.
cost like over $200 million
Something
to
like that when
produce.
you add on the marketing.
But yes, if you cannot capitalize on the international market, that is going to doom your movie. And if they did not have the international exposure that they had, that would have been a loss for them. But they were really able to clean up over there, so that was good. And I do hear they're going to be putting out a second one. So maybe
they
this,
are?
yeah, this
Huh.
is hopefully going to be a franchise. By the
Okay.
way, let me redeem myself for my movie choice. Even though I do not have to apologize for thinking Captain America was one of the best movies ever, Spider-Man, the very first one, was one as well. But
Okay.
this year, or excuse me, the second one. But this year, I also saw The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston.
Okay.
That was great, and it was based on a true story, I believe, and it was showing him how he was infiltrating one of the narco mobs, and that was It was similar to Sicario, which was out last year. Did you see that one last
No.
year?
Mm-mm.
So I would highly recommend The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston. I thought that was fantastic as well, but sadly it wasn't in the top 10.
Okay. If you like that one, I think you will like Hell or High Water. That was my favorite film overall. It's
yeah.
not a big tentpole, obviously, but it was, I believe, the best movie of the summer.
It looked great. I was misinformed. I thought it was 3 hours.
No.
So me and my wife, we were going to be, we saw a movie this weekend, and it was between Hell or High Water, because you had recommended
Yes.
it, and War Dogs. And so my wife wanted to see it, and I don't know if I purposefully told her it was 3 hours or if I accidentally said it was 3, but I said, I think it's 3 hours. So we ended up seeing War Dogs instead, but that was also a really, really good movie. So I'll see yours, Hell or
Okay.
High Water. You have to turn around and see
All
War
right.
Dogs.
If it's still in the theater, they will keep Hell or High Water for a couple more weeks.
Will they?
So, yeah, because it's getting the buzz.
I think when you saw it, and you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, it was only in a couple of
Yes.
theaters around Chicago, and now
They've
it's been a much
released.
wider release. So,
Yeah,
I'll
you
get a
should
chance
be
to
able
see
to
it.
find it in
Yeah.
most theaters now.
Good.
So yeah, check that one out. Okay, so do we like any of the stocks right now? I say no.
Well,
I don't
yeah.
like
I
any
mean,
of them.
if I had to pick one, and I don't, but if I did have to pick one, I would be looking, pick a couple. I would
Okay.
be looking for an opportunity to build a new position in Disney.
Yeah, me
If I
too.
had to pick one, I still like Comcast. They're doing well. They're probably one of the best of the studio stocks for a multiple of reasons. And if I had to do something else within the studio space, even though the theaters are struggling right now because box office year to date, box office is up 5.5% over last year, and last year was a record year. But I believe foot traffic is down, right? Ticket sales attendance is actually down like about 9%. However, though, the one Cineplex stock, if you will, that's doing well, or at least has potential to do well, in my opinion, is IMAX. So we were just talking about the importance of the Chinese market. They've got a backlog, I believe, of over 200 theaters in China. And I just read that they're also going to be putting another 100 IMAX screens in China next year. And a lot of the studios are putting more and more of their films on these big IMAX screens because they can increase the amount of money that a moviegoer will pay to be able to see these. So, as China's importance in the movie space grows, you want to find a place that's really capitalizing on it. And I think IMAX is perfectly positioned to do just that.
And that ticker is IMAX, right?
Yeah, IMAX.
Okay. Some of the other ones, Comcast ticker is CMCSA. Sony is SNE. Time Warner is TWX. Lionsgate is LGF. Disney, of course, is DIS. And Viacom is VIAB, the B shares there, if you're interested in that one. So check those out. And you can also check out our old podcast if you feel like it, on movies, which we did do
November
of 2015 or so, looking at the Oscar contenders and what was happening there, which we did get kind of correct on a few of them. But I'm sure we'll be revisiting this because it is interesting what's happening in the entertainment world right now, but some of the stocks just are not really there right now. So be sure to check those out and check out any of our other articles on Zacks.com. You can find all of our podcasts on iTunes and on SoundCloud.com. Until next week, I'll see you then.